Leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, is Uganda safe from past mistakes committed by the army, considering the state of the National Army, the current National Army, the Uganda People's Defense Forces? The political history of Uganda cannot be narrated conclusively without mentioning the role the army has played in shaping major events in the country. The British had their own army, the King's African Rifles, but with independence, the Ugandan army was formed with General Idi Amin Dada as one of its key commanders, and Dr. Milton Obote as Prime Minister and later President before the same army overthrew him in a coup. Idi Amin Dada became president and was overthrown by the Uganda National Liberation Army in 1979 with support from Tanzanian troops, whose political wing was the then Uganda National Liberation Front. Presidents Yusuf Lule and Godfrey Binaisa were in charge of the UNLA's National Army at separate times. Binaisa was ousted by the military commission led by Paulo Mwanga in a bloodless coup that involved holding Binaisa under house arrest. With the 1980 elections, Dr. Milton Obote bounced back to office, but he too was overthrown by the military junta led by Tito Okello Lutwa and Basilio Olara, who were later overthrown by the NRA, which was led by the current President General Yoweri Museveni. The NRA has since been transformed into the Uganda People's Defense Forces, and a ceremony to mark the 32nd anniversary of this transformation has been marked today in Koboko district. This day has come at a time when many people are suggesting that the army is facing its greatest test, to stay away from politics. There has even been talk of a possible coup, but this has been dismissed by those at the helm with an argument that the UPDF is professional, nationalistic and disciplined enough to avoid past mistakes. So tonight on Spectrum, we look at the role of the army in Uganda's politics to try and understand if the country is secure from past mistakes and if at all we're building a national and professionalized army. Our guests tonight, Honorable Alex Byarugaba Bakunda, Isingiro South MP, also Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. You're most welcome, Honorable Byarugaba.
Thank you very much.
We expect to be joined by Mr. Yoga Adhola, UPC Diehard and columnist. He's a former member of the Central Committee of the then Museveni-led FRONASA. We also expect to be joined by Imam Eid Kasozi, a Muslim cleric and lecturer at the IUIU, that is the Islamic University in Uganda, also a member of the JEEMA party. Honorable Byarugaba, how professional is the UPDF today?
Thank you very much, my host and all our listeners. I'd like to sound a word of congratulations to all of you for having gone through the other year and bounced into this current year safely and sound. One, it's important that we do celebrate this day. It is now 32 years since the first bullet was shot in the struggle to liberate this country. I must say and emphasize that this was not the first time a struggle had been launched to liberate this country. You all recall very well the events that led to all this. Hitherto there had been other struggles. The 1979 war, the 1972 struggle, the FRONASA, the armed wing of UNLA, which came to be known as UNLA, Malum, or if I may call it. These ones had tried to liberate this country from dictatorship, but they couldn't. But this one, we are emphasizing it because it did succeed. And you did correctly put it, that yes, hitherto we had had other armies. We had King African Rifles.
Yes.
After independence, of course, we got an army, a Ugandan army. You will recall very well, Ugandans, that in 1964, there was an army mutiny, not only in Uganda, but also in Tanzania. In Uganda, there was a lot, they played it cool. They started patronizing the army, and that's when I think Obote maybe made his first mistake and appointed Amin, the army commander. There were many other who could have taken over that role? And like what Uganda did, Tanzania disbanded the entire army when they got a mutiny. And they recruited afresh. Do you now notice the difference? And since that time, Tanzania has had a very smooth run in the political dispensation in that country, unlike ours. Because we tried to patronize the army, we are now paying for, we did pay for those mistakes. You did correctly put it, that indeed, in 1971, that same army that had been patronized overthrew Obote. You all remember the events that followed. Indeed, Amin came to power with almost a personalized army which terrorized this country up till when he was overthrown by a combined force of Tanzanian forces
and Ugandan exiles.
Of course, this one was a liberation to a great extent. But remember, it had not been homegrown. The Ugandan exiles came riding on the backs of the what?
Tanzania.
Of the Tanzanian forces. They did assist. We must appreciate and exalt them. Yes, they did. But it was not homegrown. And no wonder that after the Tanzanians left, the events that took place, everyone knows about what happened. There was total chaos. Total chaos. Even the army itself, extremely indisciplined. You know, whatever happened. I recall vividly in 1981, as a student at Makerere, I was coming from town. There were very few vehicles at that time, of course. You would struggle to enter a taxi. In the old tax park, I was there. This one I didn't. I was not told. I saw. These Duka Mikonos, these who sell sweets, hawkers. This young man was selling sweets, chewing gum, this small merchandise. A soldier just picked a sweet. A sweet.
Excuse me, I'm a little late, but can we probably have a dialogue rather than...
We shall have a dialogue.
Yeah, I'm just about to conclude the introduction. And that alone, when he demanded for a payment, that alone sparked off the anger of a soldier who turned his gun and shot the boy dead there and then.
He took his sweet.
The
boy questioned him and he shot him dead.
Shot him dead, and we all ran away. This is an incident like you can't expect today.
1981.
If it happened, this soldier would be caught, he would be court-martialed, and he would most probably face a death sentence. I think so. To me, I think it is fundamental that we do celebrate Tarehe Sita, the 32 years of the events that led to what we are seeing today.
All right. Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight. Is Uganda safe from past mistakes committed by the army, considering the state of the current National Army, the UPDF? We've just been joined by our second guest, Mr. Adhola, UPC Diehard and columnist, a former member of the Central Committee of the then Museveni-led FRONASA. You're most welcome, Mr. Adhola.
Thank you.
Is the UPDF now a professional army in your view?
I don't know what people mean by professional army. There have been incidences where this so-called professional army has behaved very unprofessionally. There was this case of Mukura burning people roasting people in the railway wagons, which has never been investigated up to today. There was this behavior in northern Uganda where people in northern Uganda suspect the stories which were being put out that Konyi was cooking people in pots, that actually it was the so-called professional army which was cooking people in pots. And so I don't know what people mean by professional army.
Do you see a difference between this army and previous armies?
I try very hard to see the difference, and I find it a little bit difficult to see the difference. Now, I would like, when talking about Tarehe Sita, the celebrations of Tarehe Sita and the celebrations of the ruling party, the NRM, I would like to go back a little bit in history. And as you mentioned clearly, I was a member of the Central Committee of FRONASA, and I left FRONASA when I realized its ideological position was not going to lead us anywhere. And I went back to the Uganda People's Congress.
Hoping it would lead you somewhere. Go on.
Yeah, it will definitely lead me somewhere. Because for me, if you want me to explain that. For me, political struggles occur in phases. We went through the anti-colonial phase, which ran from about 1900 to 1962 with the attainment of independence. And the phase we are in at the moment, in my view, is what is normally called the National Democratic Liberation phase. And this phase is going to run from 1962 for maybe another 100 or 150 years. Now, the NRM as it is constituted today has no concept of this phase of the struggle. All it does is try and error, move from era to era. And it is that move from era to era, not from trial to era, not from era to trial, but from era to era, which made me leave the FRONASA and go back to the Uganda People's Congress. Now, they might have been in power for 27 years or whatever, but politically, what advances have they made? In my view, nothing except retrogressive measures in terms of national democratic liberation.
You talk like Rip Van Winkle. You were asleep for many years. You just woken up.
No. I was not asleep for many years. I'm telling you what it is. Let's go further. What is the social base of NRM? Nothing. The NRM consists of a number of intellectuals who came together. As far as the social base, in terms of historically determined aspirations and grievances of this country, the NRM is nothing. Then look at the NRM itself as an organization. It is nothing but Museveni's instrument. And the day the NRM falls into power, I challenge you.
Falls out of power?
Yeah, falls out of power. I challenge you. That day compare it to UPC. At least UPC we are surviving. The NRM is going to fall into pieces and nobody will pick a single piece of it after that.
Well, you talk about the future. We're not there yet. UPC was given power twice. UPC lost power twice. The NRM was given power once. It still holds it.
Well, the fact that a child is 10 and has not died, or the fact that I'm 60-something and have not died, and some child dies at 2 months, does not mean that I will never die.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you sound like someone speaking from Kukuland. If you spoke to, some young 24-year-olds in a Canadian university, it would make a lot of sense. Not someone here in Kampala. The NRM has done a lot.
Yes, the point is this. The NRM in its 20-something years of power has dampened the consciousness of the people of this country. And they don't do an analysis. They accept what the NRM is saying. What is the NRM apart from Museveni's vehicle for staying in power?
Honorable Byarugaba, you probably understand this.
Yes, I do.
Explain, put those things to context for us.
One thing I wanted Uganda to know.
has done nothing after 27. The UPC did a lot. Talk to us about that.
I loved the way the analogy you used. We have some Rip Van Winkles in our communities, in our societies. People who will never ever appreciate even the smallest achievement. By the way, even God, when He was creating the world, the earth and whatever it is, in Genesis, there was certain He created for 7 days. He was doing it for 7 days. By the way, remember, not on 6 and then 7. He rested.
He did heaven once. It was perfect. After he struggled with it for 6 days.
But remember, the first time.
Are you trying to say Museveni is God?
Remember, the first time. No, I'm only making it's an analogy.
Go on,
but the first time he did it, the first day, he created something round. But when it was not complete, he looked back and said, "Yes, this is good. I think I've done something." The next day, he added something, and he said, "This is good." He was thanking himself. But when you find a Ugandan, or a group of Ugandans who can't even appreciate their own small achievements, however small, meager they may be, then I honestly don't want to be part of that. And for the younger generation, it's really demoralizing. We are looking forward, and to them, to we, the elders, to say, yes, here we've done well, here we have done well, here we have failed. I expect something like that, because we certainly couldn't have failed all these 28 years in power. UPC was given an opportunity. Twice. And overthrown twice by its own army. How are you going to convince anybody with some small senses that really that was good management? Anyway, the current army, the UPDF, has been professionalized. Why don't we look at it from the book itself? Let's look at the Constitution, and then when we gauge and say, hey, look here.
Yes, sir.
Article 208 of the Ugandan Constitution says there shall be the armed forces to be known as the Uganda People's Defense Forces. That's one. Two, the Uganda People's Defense Forces shall be non-partisan, national in character, patriotic, professional, disciplined, productive, subordinate civilian authority as established under this constitution. So out of these, about seven benchmarks, how many have they so far achieved? Let's say they have not achieved maybe all of them, but have they not achieved at least 5? Surely 5 out of 7, that could be around about 75%. That's a distinction. Let's be a little bit more scientific. So we also said there are certain functions which are expected from the Uganda People's Defense Forces. One, the functions of the Uganda People's Defense Forces are: 1, to preserve and defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Uganda. Have they done it? Have they failed? Have we been attacked and have been thrown out of our country by a foreign force? I don't think it has happened and will not happen. 2, to cooperate with the civilian authority in emergency situations and in cases of natural disasters. Haven't you seen the army involved in restoring people in distress? In Bududa, you saw it. When we had floods almost in a third of our country, in eastern Uganda, a third of the country was underwater. Okay. You saw army helicopters, army personnel doing all that they could. See, let me finish this. Okay. To foster harmony and understanding between the defense forces and civilians, and this we have seen visible. Actually, you are safer to meet a soldier at night than meeting a security guard. Is that not correct? Finally, because when you read the Constitution, you conclude at least on an article. You don't just leave it hanging. Go on, sir. And finally, these are 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth is to engage in productive activities for the development of Uganda. Haven't they been doing it? Haven't you seen them in productive activities? The UN engaged in building the data? Can I just respond to a few points? I would like you to respond to more than give credit for us. That's my point. In case the UNLA were to still be in power, if the NRA had not taken over, what kind of army would it be, do you think?
Let me first respond to a few points which he made. He says the army, by what the Constitution says, is supposed to be subordinate to civilian authority. In the last 2 weeks, the major discussion in this country has been on this question as to whether the army is subordinate to civilian authority or not. Yes, sir. And it is the leader of the NRM who has been at the leadership of saying that if Parliament, one of whom he is, does not behave, in other words, if it does not toe the line the leader of the NRM wants, the army is going to take over. Who said that? It has been said by 3 leading members. Give us some names and quotes. Yes. The army commander talked that way. What did he say? I can't get the exact words, but he talked that way. That is the army which he is telling me is subordinate to civilian authority. It is just sitting there and making sure that Parliament behaves as it wants. If it doesn't, it is moving in. We could see the UNLA over again. Okay. Secondly, he's talking of non-partisan army. Everybody in this country knows that this army participates in elections, that this army takes part in elections to influence elections in a certain way. This everybody in this country knows, and all those who are listening to me know it. So what is this deception to me? He talked about the army defending the people of this country, but he left out one thing. Our army has been interfering in neighboring countries all over the place. Oh, yes. Our army interfered in Rwanda. Our army interfered in the Congo. Our army is interfering in Somalia. What is he telling me? Is it for a good or a bad? What good purpose? Our army went into Rwanda and it imposed a Tutsi minority over the majority of the population of Rwanda. We know that the Rwandese walked out of the country, walked out of their country to demonstrate their disgust at the Tutsi minority getting into power. Where did they go? They went to Zaire, the Congo, the Zaire then, now the Congo. It was all over the place. The fellows walked out. How many are they? millions of people walked out of Rwanda. Now, what are they doing in Somalia? They are serving as what is the word I want?
Stooges? What is it?
No. Hired mercenaries. They are serving as American hired mercenaries in Somalia. That war in Somalia is an American war. It is not a Ugandan war. It is not an African war. It's an American war. And what the United States is doing is hiring our soldiers for the cheap to go and fight its war.
Is it a territorial war? America wants more land.
No, America is trying to fight Al-Qaeda. That's why it is in Somalia.
Good or bad? Is that good or bad?
I cannot say whether it's good or bad. All I can tell you is all other African countries, other than a few countries, have avoided Somalia.
All right. You've done some besmirching of the UPDF, for better or for worse. Talk to us about the UNLA and give us a scenario. Supposing they had not been overthrown in 1986, what kind of army would they be today?
We had plans. In the first place, if the so-called Luwero War had not been there, we were in a position to do a lot of changes to our things. But some fellows came around with the so-called Luwero Liberation War in Luwero and caused not just UPC in power, but caused the country a lot of problems.
President Milton Obote at the time used to call them bandits. He said we will follow them there and leave them there. He was in power. What happened?
He clearly had left them there.
He called them bandits.
He clearly had left them there. Let me tell you, on the eve of the coup, 400 members of NRA surrendered to the Zairian forces and they were disarmed. And the Zairian foreign minister came to Uganda to report this. Now, what saved the so-called liberation war in Luwero was the coup.
By Tito Kelolo.
Yes, by Tito Kelolo.
The army was throwing its leader.
Yes, by Tito Kelolo and Basilio and the others. That's what put strength into the so-called liberation struggle in Luwero.
Why did the army overthrow its leader, Milton Obote, at that time?
There were contradictions within the army, and a lot of these contradictions actually arose from the success that the war against the insurgency had scored, and a number of people were worried as to what their positions would be after the insurgents were over.
You are a member of the Central Committee, Executive Committee of the FRONASA. FRONASA, the Front for National Salvation, led by Museveni in the early 70s. In the early 70s, in exile in Tanzania. Why did you join and why did you leave?
Oh, that's a very good question. I personally went to the University of Nairobi. I did not go to the University of Dar es Salaam. The University of Dar es Salaam has to be given one credit, that at that time, the campus of the University of Dar es Salaam was very left-wing. When I left the University of Nairobi and went to Dar es Salaam, I found out that what the politics my friends were talking about was way, way beyond my understanding.
What do you mean?
Their politics was very left-wing.
Yes.
And that kind of politics was
socialist.
Yes, that kind of politics was not either in Makerere or in the University of Nairobi. So when I got there, realizing this, the first thing I did was to do catch-up, to play catch-up. And I used to buy books and read. Eventually, I got persuaded that the line that the Yoweri Museveni and others were talking about was the correct one for Uganda. In particular, when I read the writings of one author called Regis Debray. And that's the author who informed most of Yoweri Museveni's strategy in the struggle. But over time, as I transcended Regis Debray, I realized Regis Debray was false. And I gave up that and moved back to the line of national democratic liberation, which I said earlier.
Milton Obote
it's a long story.
He drove us into the move to the left.
Milton Obote was not socialist.
Or was he communist?
Let's get these terms very clear. Let's not just throw terms around.
He was left-leaning.
He was left-leaning.
He commanded the move to the left.
Yes, left-leaning, but that was national democratic liberation, not socialism.
We'll go for a break. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. We'll be back to stay tuned.
Telecommunications Commission invites entries for the 3rd ASIA Awards, scheduled for June the 7th, 2013. Visit www.ucc.co.ug/awards for information on the categories and criteria. Deadline for entries is April the 30th, 2013. ASIA, ICT Innovation for National Development.
Heed the call of the wild this Valentine's with Reds. Buy Reds and win a getaway for 2 to the Wild Waters Lodge, plus other amazing prizes. See present posters for details or visit your favorite bar or supermarket. Happy Valentine's Day from
Reds. Crisp, clean apple taste.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. Is Uganda safe from past mistakes committed by the army, considering the state of the current National Army, the UPDF? Our guest tonight, Honorable Alex Byarugaba Bakunda, Isingiro South MP, also Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, and Mr. Adhola, UPC Diehard, and a columnist. He's a former member of the Central Committee of the then Museveni-led FRONASA. That was the army President Museveni led in exile in Tanzania in the 1970s. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Honorable Byarugaba, there are complaints that the UPDF is not really national in character, that most of the generals come from one part of the country, most of the senior officers come from one part of the country. How do you explain, how can you call it professional and balanced when it has these kind of flaws?
Well, you said it all, and my colleague also hinted at it. But one thing is for sure, the historical fact is that there was a nucleus of the FRONASA guys. Here is one of them, and I do have total respect for the FRONASA people. The nucleus, the vanguards of really the liberation of this country. And I have, Honorable Mr. Adhola, you have all my respect with all your colleagues, irrespective of the disagreements you eventually had with your other colleagues. But you have all my... That notwithstanding, over time, that national character has been emphasized. And that's why we have, for instance, these quotas, regional quotas. We have them.
Well, the spokesman just said yesterday, the army spokesman, Felix Klajek, the colonel, that they don't recruit according to tribes.
They don't recruit according to tribes, but at least each region is given a quota. That from Uganda region, we'll need about 1,000. From Western region, maybe 1,200. From Eastern region, maybe 1,000, depending on the population.
But some people have said that even when you go, if you go to the West, obviously the Westerners. If you come to the Central, still the same people who live in Uganda will get the job.
Yeah, sometimes
people still from the West.
You and me as a Ugandan have heard and known clearly that sometimes these quotas given to various regions are not fulfilled. Haven't you heard about this?
The Baganda don't want to join the army.
Some Baganda actually do not like
they
this
prefer
profession.
to Dubai.
To trade and maybe do other good things as well.
Build shopping malls.
Yes, that has also been one of the smallest and biggest challenges. Yeah.
All right, go on.
And I also wanted to say, over time, certainly, that one has been overcome. And as I talk today, the younger generation military cadreship is purely, it has that national outlook. Forget about the colleagues of Mr. Adhola. They were mainly from one area, mainly. There's a few of them here. The UN. No. FRONASA had that other nucleus of mainly Westerners. Yes. But over time, they have been shedding them off. And steadily, it can be seen visibly, very clearly. I don't have to mention names. But on professionalization, I also wanted to mention that honestly, over time, you have seen it clearly. Military men, rather secular professionals, doctors,
I know about that.
In uniform,
yes.
Teachers, in uniform, accountants, in uniform, nurses, in uniform. You've seen even politicians
going
out of
uniforms,
in uniform, and also standing on their own volition and winning constituencies. We have examples. Bright Rwamirama, a Kano, Major Jessica Alupo, a major. She won her own seat in her own right.
Not as a soldier.
Isiko was a military man. He won a So this is what I mean. To me, that's what I understand by professionalism. There are many professionals now with pilots pilots in uniform. And I think this is very good enough for us to move forward. Professionalizing an army is not a simple thing.
Right.
It's a program that we have, the government has deliberately embarked on, and it is succeeding. And so far, so good. What you have seen, the discipline is immaculate.
Oh, you think so?
I think so.
That was the time when the army was feared. Do you think that has gone away?
It is certainly not there.
Honorable Mr. Adhola, talk to us about that. It's something that you believe.
Can I respond to this thing?
Please do.
Of saying having a medical doctor, having an accountant in uniform, or having a nursing in uniform is professionalizing an army. This is really nonsense.
What is it?
Every army has to have doctors.
Like Dr. Besiji.
Not just Dr. Besiji. An American army has doctors. A Tanzanian army has doctors.
Because they're professionals.
They are professionals which are necessary in the army.
Which we never had.
No, there were doctors in the army before. There were doctors in the army before.
Then what happened during UNLA time? During the days of UPC?
No, they were there.
So doctors were the same people killing the
Listen, just listen to me. Every army has doctors to treat people in the course of
a professional person in never bandage their wounds.
Yes, bandage their wounds. So what are you making a fuss about here?
So every army a professional army?
You see,
the UNLA. Give us some.
What you guys are trying to do is to say, let me paraphrase this thing for you. What you are trying to do is you are trying to say your army is politicized, not professional. This is the claim you've made over and over the years. And by being politicized, through being politicized, that's where it gets to know its objectives, it gets to know its role, and it gets to be disciplined. That's what you are trying to say.
But honestly,
now,
if I may
when I get into that, I look at I've just been reading 2 books by
Tolstoy. I can imagine Lenin.
No. I've been reading 2 books by former political commissars
James Byrd
of your army. One is Yes, one is on Doga's book, the other one is Major Kazora's book. Both these were political commissars of the NRA. And I'm amazed by the depravity of the political consciousness on the part of these political commissars.
Well, let's talk about things that many of us would. Do you think the UPDF can undertake a coup like the UNLA did in 1985 July?
The case of this coup,
which one, the 85 one?
No.
The one that's being
that is being talked about.
Dreamed about.
Yes, the one that is being dreamed about. If this coup is to take place, it is going to be led by the leadership of the army.
What nature would it take? Would it be similar to the 1985 one?
No, it wouldn't be. In the first place, if it is to take place, it will require massive publicity of the coup, and that thing is being done already.
An announcement on radio at lunchtime.
No. The preparation for the coup is what you see: statements from the Minister of Defense, statements from the President, statements from the army commander,
and coordinated movement of troops.
And having made those statements, then discussions begin. This is preparation of the psychology of the population for whatever is to take place.
Let's look at the structures of these two armies, the current army and the previous armies, the UNLA and other armies before, the Ugandan army under Idi Amin and the one before under Milton Obote one. What are the structural differences?
I'm not really in a position to address that thing. I don't.
Yeah. I wanted to quickly come in on this issue of the coup talk.
Yes.
Fortunately, I was one of those, I don't know whether privileged, but okay, privileged to be in Chankwanzi when the president was talking about those issues. I personally was there. I never heard from anybody, so I'm going to tell you exactly what I heard.
Oh, that's very good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, so that you can get out of here more informed. One, he was talking about members of parliament and the way they engage themselves with the population and their legislative and their representative roles. And he was saying that he was actually pitting members of parliament and saying, hey, look here, you are taking on too much. Fundraisings, burials, school fees, non-coffins, repairing roads, repairing schools, trying to do everything, putting everything on your head. And these heads are very small. Your pockets are very small. You don't have enough money to do all that. Why don't you make sure that these budgets you pass have all those components instead of you straining and almost breaking down? And he says, at the end of the day, you good ones, you young good ones who are so eager to make a contribution will eventually lose gas and get disgusted with the politics and leave it. And the moment you leave it, there are hawks hanging on the wings now waiting for you to fail.
Vultures.
Vultures waiting for you to fail, and they will come in and take over. When they take over, given the ideology of the army that has been created in the modern day Uganda, the army might not necessarily sit back and look at the country being raped. And I think that's exactly what he said. I'm not an army spokesperson, I'm not a government spokesperson. If anybody disputes this, he can put me.
The words dropped in your ears. Mr. Adhola,
and this is
what makes sense
about Kuz.
Well, that scenario makes sense to you.
No, that scenario doesn't make sense to me. Let me ask a few questions. In 1986, we thought a revolution came into this country.
Fundamental change.
A fundamental change, you've corrected me well. Now, a fundamental change was supposed to sweep clean these political powers.
The UNLA.
UNLA, Parliament, the NRM itself and all, and clean it of the things now NRM is complaining about 27 years later. What happened?
But you people
where did you go napping in the 27 years for you not to have cleaned these things?
Honorable Adhola, really, you know very, very well, you were part of that struggle, honestly. And you came with the reconciliatory tone. You said, let us try to put everybody on what? On board. The civil service remained intact. Remember that. Actually, the current corrupt cases were these people who were from those ends. Adhola, honestly, as a friend and as an elder, let's agree on that one. And you are part of that liberation, honestly.
No. So what I'm asking
because of that willingness, trying to bring everybody on board. Of course, there are these other rotten mangoes and apples, and that's the problem that we are currently faced with. But that said and done, I also wanted, I know time is running out, but first of all, the army is in Somalia not because America wanted them to be there. No, you created the current UPDF, Adhola. You are part of it, and you know the ideology. You know the ideology, the strict ideology. One of them was democracy, another one was. You tell them.
No, those are words.
Africanism.
No.
Africans, the one you call interference and imposing regimes. No. You are the same people who
talk us about Pan-Africanism. In FRONASA, what did you mean by those words?
What do you mean? What are you talking about now? All of a sudden you are changing that now you call it interference? Do you think the people of Somalia who had spent 20 years without any single peace didn't want also to feel that breath of peace? Do you think the people of Rwanda who were massacred? Me, I saw people floating on the river Kagera. That's where I come from. I saw people being butchered. I witnessed the bodies floating on the river, and you expected a Pan-Africanist like you, like Yoweri Kaguta, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta himself, and your other colleagues in FRONASA and eventually, of course, UPDF, to look on. What happened in Congo? What was happening in Congo? What was happening in Rwanda? What was happening in Somalia? What was happening in Sudan? In Sudan, Southern Sudan. Look at Southern Sudan now.
Mr. Adhola, he's already converted.
What is happening?
He's already converted.
Aren't you happy, Mr. Adhola, to see what is happening in Southern Sudan? You are fellow African blacks. We are also enjoying that freedom. Don't you feel proud to see that, Mr. Adhola? And you call that interference in other people's countries?
No.
And why did Tanzania come escorting you to liberate this country? Why? Supposing they had not come, would you have really come, you as FRONASA?
Let me answer you, my friend. In Rwanda, just prior to the invasion, which was by Ugandan army, not Rwanda's insurgents.
Well, the Rwandan exile, similar to 1979. Rwandan
Yes,
exile,
yes. Just before that invasion, there had been meetings in Arusha which had made arrangements for democratic involvement of the Tutsis in exile. Now, the Tutsi component, which was based in Uganda.
Similar to 85, there was peace talks in Nairobi, and then
No, you are talking about probably Moshi. But what happened in the case of Rwanda, the Tutsi component from Uganda feared losing the elections which was coming, and therefore they moved with their brothers from Uganda to invade the country. And what they have implanted today is a Tutsi hegemony in Rwanda. That's fact. Now, when you come to Southern Sudan, don't make exaggerated claims. That war had gone on for over 20 years before the signing of the peace accord, for well over 20 years, and there's very little that the NRA or UPDF did in South Sudan. That was a war by SPLA
since 1983.
The UPDF had very little to do there. Now in Somalia, no. In Somalia, the money which is paying those fellows,
yes,
the UPDF people in Somalia,
comes from the United Nations.
Comes from the United States. No,
let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. You can call in now. Our number 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. Spectrum, hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Your name? Good evening.
I'm Moses.
Yes, Moses. Spectrum, hello. Okay, let's get to the studio once again. Mr. Adhola. Yes.
Let us recapitulate what he talked about in the case of Rwanda. As far as evidence is coming, recent evidence coming out, the invasion of Rwanda came at a time when agreements were being reached at in Arusha for the incorporation of the Tutsis back into Rwanda in a democratic manner.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Good evening, your name?
Yes, I've heard and I have listened to this program. Too much was all about the professionalization of the army. Then we must as well ask, can a professional army be led by somebody who can utter something that the army will take over in the name of CDF?
All right.
Yes, that is the issue I was also raising. If this is a professional army which is subordinate to the civilian authority, how come fellows are making this kind of statements and getting away with it?
Spectrum, hello.
This is right.
Yes.
No, you know what is meant by profession? It is the way how things are done, how you act. Not because you are a doctor in the army, you are a lawyer in the army, but the way you do things.
Spectrum alert. Yes, go on, Mr. Adhola.
Yeah. If it is professional, why is it threatening to take over power just simply because MPs are questioning the executive?
Okay. Go on. Hello. Spectrum alert.
Hello.
Yes, your name?
Mohammed.
Yes, Mohammed.
Professionalizing in the army does not take a year. This process has been on, I think, from 2008. What JEEMA said, he said it as an officer, but there were other officers replied to him. I think everybody see, let's admit that. Though we are in the opposition, but there is something that big. That was how Yakarima was doing at things. But when the people of Kasia Kwanga say what Wasina said and others were joking him.
Spectrum alert. Yes, your name?
My name is Julius.
Julius, can you switch off your radio or come from it?
Okay. I want to say, I would like to dispute the idea, the reason stated by this other gentleman on the other side, that he mentioned the number of people to join the army. You can look in the three areas, the other gentlemen, especially from the west to the southwest, or is it especially their own people to be recruited? So you actually to see an element of the professionalization of the army taking place, and besides, if you just keep go on, I think the army should not even involve itself in the voting process.
Spectrum alert.
Hello.
Yes, your name? Yes.
I think we shouldn't generalize the army that it's not a professional army. It has lots of professionals, and we imagine that they're currently behaving a professional army. But we have those figures, maybe that have misled those who say they can do anything. But generally speaking, I believe that I think we now have a professional army, but with few unprofessionals.
Yes, but let's get back to the studio. Mr. Adhola. Professional army with a few unprofessionals.
The professional army with a few unprofessional.
Go on, respond to the other question.
I still insist that really what the leadership of the army is talking about is politicization rather than the so-called professionalization of the army. And why I insist on this is that what they are aiming at is imbuing the army with the necessary political consciousness for it to know its role, its objectives, and to know the direction the political direction which the country is taking. The question of being professional army just does not make sense to me. It sometimes becomes as absurd as when my friend here was saying there are doctors in the army, there are nurses in the army, when every army, when it is going for war, has to have doctors with it.
And accountants.
And accountants and
yes,
nurses and
professionalism,
so on.
Yeah.
Okay, go on, then we'll get back to Mr. Adhola.
Yes, yeah,
can respond.
Well, I can respond to some of them. Well, they were mainly comments. There were no serious questions. But one was particularly very important, very, very exciting about the professionalization of the army, that it should not take even 1 year. No, it's very, very, very easy to destroy something, but to rebuild is very, very, very difficult. I want to tell everybody that cares to know what it means to professionalize, that it will not take 1 year, it will not take 2 years, it will not take 3. It is a continuous process, and it will be very, 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 very expensive and very odious. It's an odious task. It will not end tomorrow, you can be sure. But those that will have trained incrementally, we expect them to behave very, very well. As to find some who are not professional, that's a fact. Even the American massive mighty army, you still find those rotten apples. You heard these cases. An American soldier putting on an American uniform with an American emblem and whatever. You know, mishandling the holy book, the Quran. You've seen it. So there are those kind of people raping Americans, raping in Tokyo, Japan. And they've been put, I think, on firing squad, but at least court-martialed. Okay. So these are individual cases, but overall, let's see Ugandans accept and agree to appreciate that there is something fundamentally very different from what we were used to during the UNLA days, during the first UPC days, you know, when there was state-inspired violence, killing without any question whatsoever. You heard of the case of a man who was shot around this Kabaka Njagara road towards the Rubiri, you know, shot, you know, this man shoots the fellow and waits for anybody. No, the man cries out, nobody could come near the dying man to rescue him, and he only was there laughing and telling everybody, let anybody there come here to rescue this man. And he dies like that. We've seen it all. So
we've also seen it in northern Uganda.
Northern Uganda, you know the perpetrators. The international community is still even looking for them. If they knew that, and they have all the capacity to do that, the UPDF is here. Why haven't they got any one of them? You know, for sure, an apologist to Joseph Kony and his atrocities. It's a total shame.
No,
I am happy.
A lot of those things have nothing to do with
Ugandans should know for sure UPC will not come to power when they still have people who reason.
Mr. If you are to, as we go finally, if you are to advise your old colleague, President Yoweri Museveni, about how to run the army, what would you tell him?
About what?
Well, how to make the army professional according to your own standards. What would you tell him? If you are to advise him.
If I were to advise him,
what would you tell him to do?
There's not much he can do.
It's already close to the top. We have to go. Thank you very much indeed. Honorable Alex Byarugaba, Bakunda, Isingiro South MP, also Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. Thank you for coming to Spectrum tonight. Mr. Adhola, UPC Diehard and columnist, a former member of the Central Committee of the then Museveni-led FRONASA. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond, Kizito Spectrum. We'll be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English. Do stay tuned.